Representative Enns, you are recognized for a very special presentation and dedication.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we're going to be commissioning a painting here shortly for Representative David Dank and Representative Odelia Dank. He had this artwork done for Odelia after she had passed away. But I just want to make a few comments about my seatmate. He was a great guy, you know, and some of the funny things are we called each other Tonto and the Lone Ranger. He was Tonto, I was the Lone Ranger. Other words that we had for each other were Otis and Otis. And then he had a few other colorful words for me. But one of the things that I distinctly remember about him is he brought in this big pack of individually wrapped lifesavers. And he gave me a few of them. And I'm like, I bet these don't have real sugar in them. And so I grabbed the package and I was starting to read on there, and yeah, it wasn't real sugar, and it said, may have laxative effect. And I'm like, what are you trying to do to me? It's like giving a guy Turbolax that's in a wheelchair. That's great. But it's funny too. He always had the wit about him, and unfortunately, you freshmen didn't get to see a lot of that, and you didn't get to know him very well because you missed a great guy. But for this session, he had brought, and you can go look in the top drawer back there. He brought a can of prune juice. And he says, in case we ever get stopped up in here. He was definitely a great guy, but Madam Speaker, I would like for you to recognize Mr. Speaker Jeff Hickman.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, it is a joy to have a few moments today to reflect on our good friends. I say friends, both David and Odelia Dank, who served here in this chamber, wonderful Oklahomans and wonderful members of the House. And it's a real honor today to get to complete this project that David started so long ago with the painting that will be unveiled momentarily. David's work, as we know, continues to live on with the things that we continue to do in his honor and memory, and as his legacy continues with so many issues that we continue to tackle that wouldn't have been possible without the work of David and Odelia, and particularly David's wit that we all miss. I was listening to a voicemail just last night that David had left on my phone after I was elected speaker, and the entire message was just about he had a book, 10 things you need to know about how to find your parking spot, how to use your parking spot, to back up and pull that. He wanted to make sure I saw that book. The entire message was telling me that the 10 things I needed to know about my new parking spot. But a lot of wit, a lot of fun, but a lot of real work to leave this state better than he found it. There are some special words that I'm going to have the privilege to share after we unveil the painting, but to do that, I want to introduce another special Oklahoman who served in this chamber as well for 14 years as a member of the House before he had a lapse in judgment and left and went to the other side of the building for 24 years in the Senate. Senator Charles Ford from Tulsa has also left a lasting legacy and continues to contribute to that in this building with the art that we find throughout this building. He really began this mission in the late 90s, I guess, Senator Ford, is when you started your interest in art and preservation of this building, and formed the Senate Historical Preservation Fund. They have commissioned now more than 150 pieces of art. 172 now is what they're up to by Oklahoma artists that depict historic events from the history of our state, well-known and some not so well-known beautiful places in our state, and personalities that have been part of Oklahoma. And it has not only depicted people who have helped shape our state's identity, but it has absolutely shaped the identity of this building, particularly for visitors that come here and are able to see the story of Oklahoma as told by the art in this building. And so, Senator Ford, thank you for your work. Thank you for what you've done in this building, and I would like to recognize you now to come forward and help us unveil this painting. Madam Speaker, if Senator Ford could be recognized to say a few words.
It brings back memories of when I sat back there where John Enns sat when I was a freshman, and David Bourne sat back on the back row here. He was a backbencher, and the reason he was a backbencher because the cameras were up here. If they'd been up where they are today, he would not have been a backbencher for obvious reasons. But he stayed back there because he could get out and go to his office and practice law. I don't know why lawyers do that, but I had the privilege of knowing Dave Dank on several occasions. One when he became the lobbyist for the retail merchants and was a pretty staunch Democrat, but a conservative Democrat. I knew him when he became a Democrat. I knew him when he became a Republican. I also knew him when he had cancer. And then I knew him when he married Odelia. Through all that, David never changed. He was witty, expressed a lot of things in blunt manner. He always knew exactly where David was. But we have his own words of how this project came about. And I think we'll ask Charlotte and David's daughter, Dr. Trina Jocelyn, to come forward, and we'll unveil the painting. Then we can talk about it. This painting was painted in 1985 by Greg Burns. Greg paints with pen and watercolor, and he does the pen with his hands, and he does the watercolor with a stylus in his mouth because he's a paraplegic. You can read all about it in the this is sunset at Lake Hefner. Lake Hefner is entirely in Dave Dank's district. So when I purchased this, I thought of Dave, and he immediately said yes. And I think we'll turn it back over to Speaker and let him talk in Dave's words about how this project got involved. Mr. Speaker.
Charlotte found in David's office. I told you I could do this, John. I don't know if I can do it or not. David had already written his words for today. And she found in his office his words by his desk. And Trina, it's an honor for me to get to try to read your dad's words about your mother. And I know he was so proud of you and particularly grandchildren. It's amazing the bond that grandchildren and the grandparents have. I'm told it's because they all have a common enemy. And he was particularly proud of his grandchildren, of your children. But we're honored that you're here today. Let me make this attempt as best I can to honor our friend and read the words that David had prepared for today. Speaker Hickman, thank you as well for permitting this painting to be part of the House display. I want to thank everyone for being here today to help us dedicate this wonderful painting to an equally wonderful lady. A special thanks to Charlie Ford, who has done so much to beautify our Capitol with so many great works of art. And of course to Greg Burns, that extraordinary artist who has captured so many Oklahoma scenes. He cannot be with us today, but I know you all join me in appreciating his terrific career. Now, some might wonder what a painting of Lake Hefner has to do with Odelia. Well, it is right at the heart of the district she represented so well for 12 years, and which I am now privileged to represent. Of course, the district was also represented once by a young legislator named Mary Fallon. From the home we shared more than 3 decades, Lake Hefner is virtually right in our backyard. And most of all, this is a serene painting, and it reflects the serenity with which Odelia lived her life. I can easily visualize her sitting by the lakeshore at sunset, saying, quote, "I did what I set out to do." If we could sum her up in one word, it would be service. As a teacher and counselor, she served thousands of young people. As a mother and grandmother, she served her family. As a legislator, she served the people of Oklahoma and the residents of her district, always with honor and dedication. She had the honor of being the first Republican to chair the Education Committee. In that role, her first and only goal was to pass legislation that benefited the children of Oklahoma. For Odelia, kids always came first, whether they were her own or not. A member of the other party once told me that she was respected on both sides of the aisle because, as he put it, she was always a lady. As her husband for so long, I can attest to that. There are portraits and statues all over the Capitol of past leaders of the legislature, past governors, and past secondary state officials. Odelia would have had no interest in that kind of recognition. I think she would see this painting as one of Central Oklahoma's best-known landmarks, created by one of our best-known artists, and that she would have said, "That's a good way to remember me." I think so too. So let me offer, on her behalf, our deepest appreciation for this beautiful work of art that will always be associated with her name and legacy. The words of Representative David Dank. And it's an honor for me to get to share this.
We originally had scheduled to dedicate this painting on a Monday before the Friday that David passed away. And it was to be in honor of Odelia, but now it's in the memory of both Danks. At this point, I'd like to call on Commissioner Brian Vaughn, and would you come up and speak for the family in regards to this occasion?
Well, just on behalf of the Dank family, we have Odelia's daughter Trina and her in-laws, Ann and John Oakes, and my mother, of course, was his secretary for 9 years, and Charlotte. We also have Michael Taylor and Mike Brake, who are 2 close associates to David that are here. This was really supposed to be all about Odelia, though. And, one thing that was made in the decision to cancel this on the original day, as Senator Ford mentioned, was because I just thought it wasn't going to be about Odelia if we did it then, because we wanted and needed to honor David. And so we appreciate that it's in memory of both, but I really stress the fact that David wanted this done for Odelia. In honoring David, you'll remember Odelia, because that was his girl, as he mentioned, and you mentioned that the freshmen maybe didn't get a chance to know Representative Dank very well, and for those who didn't get to know Odelia Dank, you really missed something. She was the lady of the highest respect, and it's not often that you get to say that you interfaced with giants, and she was a giant of a person and made an impact. We would have dinner frequently, and we would hardly ever be out to eat when somebody wouldn't come up and talk to her about, "Do you remember me?" And of course her panic face would kick in about not knowing for sure who they were, because she had impacted so many countless lives in education, not including those that she touched in political office. And they wouldn't always be the students. I was always impressed by that it was sometimes the parents and the grandparents who came and said they were so aware of her presence and the impact she had made in their loved one's life. I mean, you don't think about how many of you know the counselors or the educators of your children, by name and by sight, that you could go see 40 years later out of place and know that they made that kind of an impact in your kid's life or your grandkid's life. And of course, there were the students that came as well. But then, as not only a legislator, she agreed to go on and be the vice chair of the party. You know better than anyone how busy you are maintaining the constituency in your district. And she didn't always get a pass on as far as elections go. She'd have a campaign in her district and then go around and speak. And because our chair that time was originally from Tulsa, she was often asked to take on the entire southwest part of Oklahoma for splitting up their speaking engagements. So she would do session here. She would go out and do campaigning in her district. She would then go out and campaign across the state or speak, and every little itty-bitty group was just as important as the largest group. She usually didn't go with entourage. She usually didn't go where there was a staged photo op. She went to empower whatever little group who was trying to make better government for Oklahoma. And then what didn't ever change, what didn't ever get in the way of anything was her family. And she came back and dedicated most of her weekend to her grandkids and her daughter. And so you talk about balance and being able to make a broad spectrum impact. It's just unbelievable. And in addition, she was a friend to thousands, myself included. So on behalf of everybody who has taken precious time out of the state's agenda today to honor the Danks, we thank you, and most especially Senator Ford, we appreciate you thinking ahead to think about how Lake Hefner would be an appropriate serene setting, as David mentioned in his remarks, which incidentally were found by his easy chair. These were the last things he was working on when he passed. And so he was thinking about Odia. Those were his last thoughts before he passed away, and those were his writings right there beside him. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.